Number 10, Kitty Pryde and Star-Lord. This is one of those relationships where there was really no reason for these two to be together. Really. It's just so random. Star-Lord is cosmic, Kitty is an X-Men. I'm not saying the X-Men never go to space, because they definitely do go to space a lot, but it seems like these two only got together because they happened to meet one another in space once. Then they began a long-distance relationship. From there, things got more serious and eventually ended up with Kitty joining the Guardians, accepting Star-Lord's marriage proposal, but later deciding her and Peter just weren't meant to be because, well, he couldn't prioritize their relationship while also ruling Spartax. Which I get it, when you're ruling a world, it's probably hard to have a relationship, but I don't know, maybe let your partner help you with it? I don't know. Me trying to give relationship advice to superheroes. Number 9, Bishop and Deathbird. I mean, this was mostly just a weird relationship. What do these two characters have in common? Not much. Their relationship was pretty much constantly strained because they rarely ever agreed with anything, and also because Bishop is a hero and Deathbird is a villain, they would even fight against one another during the course of their relationship. Overall, it just seems odd that they tried so hard to make this work when it was obviously never going to. The one thing I will say that was cool that came out of these two being together is that there's an alternate reality where they actually stay together and they have a daughter, Aaliyah Bishop, who is pretty cool, unique, cosmic based, and overall is a badass character. So yeah, I like her. So there's a bit of a silver lining here, as with most weird, but not all weird couples. At least we got a silver lining, so that's nice. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show it by clicking like, subscribing, commenting, doing all the things. Also, if you love X-Men as much as I love X-Men, we got a playlist for that, so check it out. Number 8, Cyclops and Emma Frost. So actually, over the course of working on this channel, I have come to love and respect the relationship between Cyclops and Emma. I think I actually, over time, have just come to love and respect Emma more as a character. It's like the more I read about her and get to know her, the more I love her. Remember way back when I started on this channel and I said I could only imagine Cyclops with Jean? Nah. Those days are gone. I have changed since then. But what is weird about these two together is when Emma kind of cosplayed as Jean and then had an affair with Cyclops in his mind. That was a pretty strange moment in their relationship. Made only more weird by Jean psychically walking in on them. Like, imagine walking in on your partner to find them cheating on you with someone who is dressed up just like you. That would be an experience, right? Especially if you walked in on them in their mind. It's a lot. Although I'd also be like, why are you in my mind? This is an invasion of my mind privacy. Number 8, Mystique and Professor X. These two are presented in the X-Men prequel films as having a father-daughter relationship, which is hugely problematic if you are familiar with these two in the comics. Professor X and Mystique have often been presented as foes, and even sometimes allies or childhood friends in the comics. Mystique's origins actually are widely mysterious. We know a lot about her, but we don't know exactly how old she is, or even all the things that she has done. We do know, however, that she was married to Professor X. Yeah, that's right. And while under the guise of Moira McTaggart, had his son. I would be almost willing to accept this random happenstance of romance had it actually been explained in the comics. But it's really not. It's offhandedly referenced in Uncanny X-Men and Battle of Atom, where we meet Charles Xavier II, their son. But that's it. If you don't believe me that these two took it too far, just think about the name of their son. Like Charles Xavier II? Really? So unimaginative. Why even have them hook up? What's the point? Mystique has had many relationships over the years, including a strange one with Sabretooth. But one of my actual favorites has been her long-time relationship with fellow mutant Destiny, who has the power to see future possibilities. The more nearer the possibility, the better her sight. I love them together. I wish they could have taken it further. Number 7, Silk Spectre and Dr. Manhattan. Aw, but it's such a sweet relationship. It really isn't. In the comics, Silk Spectre is just a teenager when she pursues a relationship with Dr. Manhattan. She's 16, and Dr. Manhattan at the time is a grown man in his 30s, and beyond that, he's kind of a god. And this all happens much to the displeasure of Laurie's mother. The film adaptation simply had Carla Gugino, the actress who plays her, look a touch younger using some makeup, making their initial attraction feel less creepy than it is. Beyond the fact that Silk Spectre is a teenager, the two end up together for 20 years, while Dr. Manhattan continues to grow ever distant. The fact that they stayed together for that long blows my mind. Manhattan was already very disconnected from humanity when he met Laurie. I can't imagine what maintaining a relationship for that long with one another was like for either of them. Like, just let it go. Number 6, Iron Man and Black Widow. Wow. Where to start with these two? They're kind of a big deal in the Ultimate Universe. The two hook up to the disapproval of Tony's butler Jarvis, and rightly so. But we'll get to the why in a moment. A highlight from them taking things too far is the fact that they made a sex tape, and that it also got released, and that it was also in circulation after Tony was betrayed by Natasha, who was apparently using him this entire time to get her hands on tech, double-crossing not just Tony but the entirety of the USA, when she revealed that she was actually still working as a Russian spy. She even shocks Tony, who seems amazed, but she just laughs it off, mocking him for not suspecting the Russian spy to double-cross him. Obviously he wouldn't suspect that. You weren't a Russian spy at the time, he thought. And Jarvis was right not to trust her, not just because of this betrayal, but because this betrayal also led to his death. That's right, Natasha kills Jarvis. Cruel. Ultimate Universe, yeesh. Number 5, Supergirl and Comet. The stories we used to tell in comics. Remember that time that Supergirl dated her horse? Yeah. Supergirl used to travel around with her horse Comet, who used to be a centaur until he wanted to become a man and asked Circe for help, but Circe gave him a potion that transformed him into a horse instead. He followed Supergirl back to Earth one day in horse form and communicated with her telepathically while accompanying her on missions as her super horse. Anyways, he ended up meeting a wizard who was able to grant him the power to transform back into a man whenever a comet passed over his head. I know, it's really oddly specific. Comet had always loved Supergirl, and so once he had transformed into a man, he used his form as an opportunity to get closer to her. The thing that really makes this couple weird and too much is that Comet decided to withhold that he was actually Supergirl's horse, fearing that she would reject him. Instead, he just smirks about it whenever he kisses her. Tee-hee, so funny. Oh my goodness. Number 3, Stacy X and Angel. And if you thought Paige and Warren were weird, I have one that's even a little bit weirder perhaps. Stacy X is a mutant who can affect the way you feel, making you nauseous, dizzy, or even really good, using pheromones. She worked for a time at a brothel using her mutant powers. That brothel got attacked by an anti-mutant group and burnt to the ground, so Stacy X reluctantly at first decided to join up with the X-Men, who would help to confront the group that targeted her workplace. She ended up developing a pretty epic crush on Angel, to the point that although she knew he was already taken, she sent him a video of her jumping rope naked. This never really led to a full-on relationship, but it's so wild, I had to include it. Also, apparently this is a thing that people do. People on Twitter told me this is a thing that people do. I'm not sure if I fully believe it, but apparently it happens. Also, I love Stacy X, but she is so weird. Like, who sends someone a video of them jumping rope naked? This is a real thing? This is a real thing? What's happening with the world? What are we doing with our lives? Stacy X must have some amazing inner confidence and self-esteem, and anyone that's done that to send those videos. I love that. I love that confidence, I will say. Love yourself, love your body, jump rope naked. I don't know. What are the takeaways from this list? Number 2, Madeline Pryor and Cyclops. I mean, I have to talk about this one. I have to talk about it. I don't have a choice. Madeline Pryor is the clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister so that he could engineer the perfect mutant offspring, or just the perfect mutant if you will, after Jean's apparent death. Cyclops would meet Maddie and fall in love with her because, well, she reminded him of Jean, probably, although for some reason no one ever thought this was super suspicious or weird that she was a one-for-one copy of Jean. Just a coincidence, they thought. Nothing to worry about, they thought. Well, turns out it was something to worry about when Jean Grey reappeared after Scott and Maddie had their first child together and were married, and Cyclops decided to leave his family to go adventuring with his fellow mutants once more. This ended up driving Maddie crazy, unlocking her true psionic potential and causing her to make a deal with demons. Because that's what happens when someone leaves you. She would go on to have an affair with Scott's brother Havoc and become a frightening mutant-based supervillain. So, not your typical fairy tale ending for these two. Number 1, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And if you want to get into more awful stuff from the universe from whence this relationship came, be sure to check out Worst Things from the Marvel Ultimate Universe. That's a series of videos we did, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened. I got a lot more things to share with you. Yes, on the Earth of 1610, also known as the Ultimate Reality, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were a couple. And yes, they were still brother and sister. And it could be possible in this reality that Wolverine who saw them getting intimate together was even their father. It was probably still Magneto though, but it definitely doesn't make any of this better. It doesn't make it better. I mean, I don't know what you could do to make this relationship better. Either just don't have it happen at all, or have these two not be brother and sister. Or at least make it so they didn't know that they were brother and sister and this was some kind of awful, twisted mistake. That might help, but no, they knew. They were into it. People joked about it, and then it was confirmed as being a thing in the Ultimate Comics. On behalf of 1610, I'm very sorry about that. Number 10, Venom and Eddie Brock. I figured I would throw you a bromance of sorts too on this list, with Eddie Brock and his relationship with his symbiotic friend Venom. Though really the two of them together are truly Venom. True love. The thing that really makes these two pretty nuts together isn't even that one of them is technically an alien entity. It is the codependency. When we look at relationships objectively, you want to have a certain sense of self. There should be you, your partner's self, and the relationship. In a sense, all sort of separate entities. With symbiosis, we don't get this. Heck, the two entities have even admitted their need and love of one another to feel that they are complete. And they have basically had 2 children together. And if you think Eddie has no part in the reproduction of a symbiote, check out Venom issues 164 and 165. The symbiote needs Eddie and his sweet love chemicals to live, and Eddie is pretty much straight up addicted to Venom, believing that Venom makes him a better person. While I know the two have been villainous together in the past, ultimately Venom is at this point an anti-hero, with even his newest film introducing him as such, an unconventional violent hero that just loves tater tots and chocolate. While my partner and I also love tater tots and chocolate, we do not need one another to literally survive. So, seems like a bad idea. Codependency is just not a good way to go in a relationship. Number 9, Black Widow and the Hulk. For some reason, the MCU felt like this was a good relationship to establish, giving Natasha the kind of soothing effect on Bruce that his cousin Jennifer Walters in the comics is sometimes able to have, with Natasha and Bruce having a similar connection comparable to Jen and Bruce's connection. I mean, it's not like Natasha and Bruce are incestuous in any means, as they're not related, but the implications that come out of the similarity of these relationships are problematic. People had also dubbed the pairing Hulk Tasha, mashing up Bruce's superhero persona of the Green Giant with just straight up plain Natasha, is so wrong on so many levels in terms of what you are then led to imagine and picture. I'm not going to get explicit here, but you know what I mean. This relationship also seemingly came out of nowhere. It is not based on any comic book lore. As such, the MCU has to justify it a bit, leading us to this scene between Bruce and Natasha talking about how they feel like they are both monsters. The most problematic thing is that being a monster in this scene equals not being able to have kids, highlighting not the fact that Natasha is a monster because she's an assassin, but because she is sterile. This whole scene is just really odd. This whole relationship is really odd. Like, they sell it well, but I don't know if we ever really needed it. Number 7, Bloke and his unnamed boyfriend. Well, there are lots of people that come to mind when we first talk about Marvel's first gay relationships and intimate moments in the comics. The very first gay kiss, I believe, came actually in 2001, but it's a little disappointing. Bloke is a new member of the X-Force who just happens to be gay. We meet him first in issue 117 of X-Force, and in issue 118 we get to see him with his boyfriend. But in the same issue, he also ends up dead. So, making it pretty weird that this is where Marvel chose to introduce a gay couple. I guess for some this might be seen as kind of cool because there wasn't really any showboating with Bloke's sexual identity. He was gay, but then he didn't make a big deal out of it, and it wasn't made a big deal out of in the comic. But on the other hand, introducing a gay character only to kill him shortly after revealing that he's gay, that's kind of a weird choice. However, you do have to give credit to Peter Milligan for even putting this in the comic and then for continuously showcasing gay characters in his work. So this wouldn't be the last gay couple that we'd see in X-Force, and likely actually pave the way for making those more long-lasting characters and relationships in comics possible. So it's weird, but it's also not weird. You know what I mean? Number 6, Storm and Quicksilver. Say what? When did this happen? Or more importantly, where did this happen? This is a relationship that comes to us from the the universe of Earth 295, also referred to as the Age of Apocalypse. Storm and Quicksilver might sound like the weirdest couple ever on paper, but you have to remember that both characters were different in this universe. Quicksilver was much less of a brat here, as in Age of Apocalypse he lost his sister quite early on, and this was also a much more apocalyptic type reality, which meant more was demanded of him. Storm was still her badass self though. I don't think there's a reality that exists where Storm is not a badass. Number 5, Rogue and Sentry. This one is only half of an ex-couple, but it's so bizarre I had to bring it up, so you're welcome. Back when Sentry was retconned into existence, it was also heavily implied that he was Rogue's first. And all because he was the only one who could touch her. I have so many questions. And I also feel like we need to stop putting Rogue in relationships with people simply because they can touch her. Physical intimacy does not a relationship make. I know that it's probably been hard for Rogue not being able to touch those that she loves, but that shouldn't mean that she falls in love with someone just because she can touch them and they can touch her, right? Which is definitely what is implied happened here when the subject is brought up during Sentry's funeral and she runs off in tears. Poor Rogue. For so many reasons, poor Rogue. Number 4, Husk and Angel. Husk and Angel are a couple that I have a lot of feelings about. The weirdest part of this relationship that most people point to is the age difference and the difference in experience between the two. Warren is a full-on adult and one of the original X-Men members. In other words, he's older. Whereas Husk is a teenager. I think she was like just 19 or 18, so technically an adult, but still pretty young. Still a teenager, so like an adult, but a teenager. Young adult. There's also the fact that Husk was this weird rebound for Angel where he claimed he was going to love her forever, but it didn't really last past Chuck Austin's run, and it's never really come up since, I don't think. He had just gotten out of a lengthy relationship with Betsy Braddock, who was going by Psylocke at the time. It was just an awkward relationship, and if you don't believe me, take a look at the time Husk and Angel made up after an argument by getting intimate in the sky above Paige's mom and the X-Men. Yikes. That was a thing that happened. Number 4, Arisia Rabb and Hal Jordan. Arisia was a young girl when she first met Hal Jordan. She inherited her spot on the Green Lanterns Corps through her family, being the 5th person from the family to join the Green Lanterns. She initially meets Hal and develops a bit of a crush, with Hal seeing Arisia like his little kid sister. Everything from there got really weird with her and Hal, when she was reassigned with some fellow Green Lanterns to Earth and started crushing super hard on him. She subconsciously uses her power ring to alter her age and claims that she now not only looks like a grown woman, but has the mind of a grown woman as well. How can this be wrong, this love I feel for you? This somehow changes everything, and although Hal originally has some hang-ups about starting a relationship with Arisia, because she's really still kind of a young woman, he ultimately gives in to his desire for her. Well, it seems like the writers decided after introducing Arisia they just wanted her to be an older character, an older Green Lantern. Instead of just writing her out and writing in an actual older character to play his love interest, they made this relationship super weird. One of the most disturbing things is that it is also implied that the pair do have sex, and none of the other Green Lanterns seem to see anything wrong with their relationship. Some of them actually encourage it to the point that it's creepy, like when Guy spikes everyone's drinks at New Year's. Why? Number 3, Ant-Man and the Wasp. The comic version of these two are far less sweet than their MCU counterparts. Why this relationship went really as far as it did is beyond me. The two fell in love while on a mission to avenge Janet's father's death, but the two were really not meant to be. They had a strange relationship in the beginning, with Janet almost being presented as younger than she was. This was not helped by the fact that Hank always seemed to be mentoring her, helping her to develop as a hero, and kind of babying her sometimes, or looking after her, making the relationship seem like it was just weird and doomed from the beginning. It all went sideways when Hank's mental health started to deteriorate. He had never felt confident enough to propose to Janet, believing he wasn't worthy of her. But after a few mental breaks, he had adopted the alternate personality of Yellow Jacket, a strong-willed and almost manic persona. He broke into the Avengers mansion and kidnapped Janet and then proposed to her. To the surprise of all of the Avengers, Avengers, but maybe not the readers. She said yes, having been waiting forever for him to pop the question. You know your wedding is a bad idea when it shocks the rest of your teammates, especially if your teammates are the Avengers. The two were married, and although Janet felt remorse for taking advantage of Hank while he was mentally unstable, she ultimately decided that it was fine. This of course led to Hank continuing to get even more manic and resulted in him being not just a bad hero, but a bad husband and partner when he slapped Janet after she expressed concern about one of his devious plots, knocking her to the ground. The two divorced, but years later, the two seemed to have resumed being romantically involved. What? Though at least Janet was smart enough to refuse his next marriage proposal. Good on ya. Number 2. Batman and Talia. Granted, Talia isn't so much a superhero, but she does often help Batman out. The two are originally pitched as star-crossed lovers in the comics from two different worlds. Batman is a vigilante and a hero, and Talia is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, leader of the League of Assassins. Part where this relationship goes too far is where somewhere down the line, DC decided to establish that the son that Talia and Batman have together is a product of rape. In the 1987 version of this story, Talia and Batman are practically married in Bruce's mind, and for all intents and purposes in love, while for a time, Ra's and Batman work together towards a common goal. During this time, Talia becomes pregnant but claims that she miscarried, though it is later revealed that she ended up having the baby. When the story of Batman and Son was retold in 2006, DC decided to change the details. In this retelling, Batman was drugged by Talia and raped, which is how Damian came to be. What's worse is the animated retelling of this story, where Batman isn't even mad about this revelation, and Talia seems to reminisce about the time she raped him, like creepily fondly. Why? Number 1. Hulk and She-Hulk. If you've watched some of our She-Hulk videos, you may have already heard me talk about this relationship that just really should have never happened. And if you haven't, you might be stunned that this even happened. There are a couple instances in the comics where this was maybe hinted at being a thing, but the most disturbing one is the Old Man Logan storyline, where Bruce and Jen apparently hook up in a post-apocalyptic future and have a whole brood of kids together. So, you know this happened more than once. It's also never really specified as to whether or not this was consensual. So that is also a huge issue when it comes to this awful incestuous relationship. Just try to close your eyes and just imagine that it never... Nope. Not working, making me imagine it more. Ick. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope you had fun counting down these 10 more superhero relationships that just went way too far in our comic books. Are there any couples that we still have yet to mention that you think go way over the top, way too far? And who are some of your favorite relationships from comics? I personally think we should do a list on superhero couples that didn't take it far enough. Number 10, Rogue and Iceman. One of the relationships that just didn't seem to work for many readers was the forced comic book relationship between Rogue and Iceman, which seemed to be inspired by the Fox X-Men films where the two were together. I'll admit that watching the movies, I personally did not mind it, but of course in my heart of hearts, Rogue and Gambit will always win out the day when it comes to both Rogue and Gambit's one true love and romance being each other. So it was very strange when the comics came to echo the films by trying to make Rogue and Iceman a thing. Because while in the movies, Gambit might not be around to steal Rogue's heart, in the comics he still very much existed, like a lot. But instead it seemed that the Ultimate Universe had other plans that more followed in line with the Fox film franchise shifts. After absorbing Gambit's powers and killing him, she ended up being able to touch people without hurting them, and so Rogue decided to touch Bobby. Because I guess that's what you do. Number 9, Richter and Wolfsbane. So admittedly, these two weren't really so much a problem together. It was more when they had split up and then Richter was with his close friend and recent lover Shatterstar that things got kind of weird. Although they also had a kind of weirdness that was really well written and allowed us to tackle a bunch of different real world issues within the world of the X Factor series. So it was a good kind of weird, really. It was a good kind of weird, but it was still weird. Reign intended to rejoin X Factor after leaving the X-Men and X-Force behind, only to find out that Richter is now with Shatterstar. And to be clear, I don't think Reign actually wanted to leave the X-Force, more she kinda got like kicked out of the X-Force. Sad. Reign returning was immensely offended by Richter having moved on and by his gay relationship with Shatterstar. Reign actually claims that the child that she's pregnant with is Richter's, hoping to undo his gayness and win him back. The child was not Richter's, of course, but was actually Harim Ari's, who had given up his life to save both Reign's and the life of their child. Eventually, Richter finds out the truth about this, but in an amazing turn of events, decides to still support Reign, despite the fact that she lied to him. And the two actually end up having a great heart-to-heart about just everything that's happened between them. Reign would even later team up with Shatterstar to defeat a demon following this ordeal. Like I said, it's weird, but it's good weird. Because I also love that like part of the resolution is like, let's team up together and fight a demon. Yeah, that's bonding. Me and my ex's partner. I think it's so cute. Two exes coming together to be friends. Yes. Number 8, everyone? Everyone in a relationship with everyone. Welcome to Krakoa. A more unconventional, I suppose, kind of weirdness is going on right now in Krakoa that has got a lot of people talking. People are talking about this all the time in comments online. They're like, what is going on? With this melting pot of all the X-Men and mutant history being mixed together, it seems like all relationships are kind of existing at once in a way on Krakoa right now. Relationships are not as clearly defined here. Many characters seem to be weaving in and out of multiple relationships almost seamlessly, as though we are kind of welcoming in an age of polyamory, which I guess makes sense considering one of the guiding laws or principles on Krakoa is to make more mutants. How do you do that? Well, when a mutant and another mutant fall in love. An example of this is what we are seeing in the summer house, where everyone has their own room, but you may have noticed that Wolverine is also bunkering down with the Summers. Jean's room in the house is actually situated between both Wolverine and Cyclops's, and both Logan and Scott also seem to be getting along better than ever, as though the love triangle has evolved to some kind of throuple, which I'm super into, I gotta be honest. But yeah, you should definitely check out these blueprints, because you can see it. It's like Jean and then like Wolverine and Cyclops on either end of her rooms. And of course, this is only one of many different examples that are out there in the comics right now. I personally find it refreshing to see these types of less mainstream, but very much real world sorts of relationships getting some love in literature, and especially with very mainstream publishers like Marvel, because yeah, I feel like we don't see that as often. So is it weird really, or is it just great? I want to say it's just great. That's my opinion. But you can let me know your opinion in the comments, because that's also, I like other people's opinions, whether or not they match my own. Let's all share opinions and be friends. You know what I mean? Number 7, Pyro and Jean Grey. In issue 9 of Marauders, this ship happens between St. John Allardyce's Pyro and Jean Grey's Marvel Girl. Of course, no need to panic about how or why this happened, as in actuality, it's not real. I'm not sure if it was Pyro himself who came up with the idea of Jean and him being shipped in this telepathic illusion, or if it was Emma, but I feel like since Emma Frost's the one creating it for Yellow Jacket with the help of the Stepford Cuckoos, it's likely that she is the one who decided to ship the two together. I also see her being like, who do I want to ship Pyro with? Jean, because I hate Jean. No, I don't know. They love each other now. They hate each other. I don't know what's going on. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list as much as I am loving bringing it to you, please be sure to reciprocate the love by giving this video a thumbs up. And I'm sending love back out to you right now, so thank you for doing that. Number 6, Cypher and Bay. Technically, both of these two are mutants, but their relationship developed kind of suddenly, which is what makes it so weird and also so great. Once again, though, this is another kind of charming and endearing weird relationship. Really, I just love weird things, I think, so I think many of them are charming and endearing to me. Most of them are. These two met during the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords event, and their challenge where they faced off against each other was to get married? If you, like me, love weird stuff, by the way, and if you haven't checked out Ten of Swords yet, you need to do that. It is so amazingly weird. You gotta read it, it's so good. Both Cypher and Bay did end up following through with this challenge, both gaining points for their team. And since then, this arranged marriage between the Krakoan mutant and a Rocco mutant has stuck. Hey, if it works, it works. Number 5, Magic and the Death Commandos. So this is less of a full-blown relationship and more of a weird tactical move of Magic's in combat, but it caught me so off guard and made me laugh so hard when I read it that I thought I needed to share it with you, so here we go. Also, anything that allows me to celebrate the awesome mutant series we have going on currently makes me really happy, so I'm happy to bring it to you. New Mutants being one of those series. Here, Magic and the team are facing off against Sybil and the Shi'ar Death Commandos, a group of hired muscle, basically. At one point, Magic confronts the team of Death Commandos in issue number 5 of the newest New Mutants run, volume 4, that started in 2019. She asks them if any of them want to make out, and when they reveal that they either aren't interested or they're too busy working to accept her offer, she tells them they made the wrong choice. Apparently, if they had agreed, then magic would have been cool, defeating them with love, but in this case, they'll be dealing with magic and her soul sword instead. Yeah, they definitely made a bad choice. And fortunately, none of them happen to be human, which means that magic doesn't have to worry about not killing them, as per Krakoa's rules. Some very bad news for the Death Commandos. Number 4, Angel and Psylocke. These two had some super intense weirdness show up in their relationship, and it all went down when Angel as Archangel became the new Apocalypse. Psylocke was his love at the time, and against her will, he managed to brainwash her into becoming his bride, despite the fact that he was already with Pestilence, who was also his baby mama. He was like, I'm with you, Pestilence, but I feel like I need another bride, you know what I mean? All the brides gather round, says Angel. You might think, well, hey, that's pretty awful and weird, but guess what? It only gets weirder. Psylocke was freed of Archangel's / new Apocalypse's control and attempted to appeal to him, to make him remember the goodness inside of him and revert him back to the hero he was. However, when this failed, she was forced to kill him. Angel, however, didn't die permanently though, but instead was resurrected into a new version of himself, becoming Angel once more. This new version of Angel was a complete refresh of the character, with all of Warren's past memories being lost to him, including the memories about him and Psylocke being in a relationship. His appearance was also back to his original look, except for some reason, he still had his techno-organic wings. Because I guess techno-organic wings are way cooler than organic wings, but you know what's not cool? His and Psylocke's relationship, I suppose. Because they cut that part. Number 3, Mystique and Gambit. More of a moment in the comics than a full-blown couple, but still these two together were a weird time. Especially considering that Gambit is often seen as the true love of Rogue, and Mystique is, of course, Rogue's mother. Adoptive mother, but all the same. Already we got a super weird scene where a mutant student of Gambit's, known as Fox, approached him in the showers attempting to seduce him. Gambit manages, though it seems just barely, to resist her charms, and this is already awkward enough as this is a student-teacher relationship, so but it's made even weirder when we later learn that Mystique had actually infiltrated the Xavier school under the guise of Fox, who was never really a true student, as this was just a disguise devised by Mystique. Mystique later claims to have done this in an attempt to protect her daughter against Gambit, whom she didn't think was good enough for her daughter. But I gotta be honest, trying to seduce your daughter's partner seems like a really weird way at attempting to protect them. No wonder Rogue is always getting mad at her adoptive mama Mystique for meddling. She's like, this is weird, Mystique, don't meddle this way. This is not a normal mom thing, stop it. Number 2, Nightcrawler and Amanda Sefton. So this is a weird one, because before Amanda Sefton was known as Amanda Sefton, she was Jermaine Zardos, the daughter of Nightcrawler, admittedly his adopted sister, as Nightcrawler of course was not born into the Zardos family, but was merely taken in and raised by them. But still, it's pretty weird, they're still siblings. Even weirder, Jermaine had apparently always been in love with her brother, but when he was accused of murdering their other brother, Stefan, Jermaine refused to accept that Kurt had done so in cold blood and sought him out to find out what was really going on. In truth, Kurt had actually killed Stefan, but only because Stefan had, at an earlier time, made Kurt promise to do so if he ever became too dangerous, which was what happened. Jermaine disguised herself as Amanda and did her best to make sure no one would recognize her, not even her brother Kurt, who grew up with her. This plan miraculously worked, and Amanda began to investigate and also date her brother. Oh my. What's going on? Number 1, Juggernaut and She-Hulk. Juggernaut isn't a mutant, and is usually more often thought of as an X-Men villain, but he has also teamed up with the X-Men from time to time, even sometimes seeing eye to eye with his stepbrother Charles Xavier, though usually that's not the case. She-Hulk, however, is not a member of the X-Men, nor has she ever been, and is not a mutant, but she is an acclaimed hero, which is one of the things that makes this relationship so weird. Well, that and the fact that it was a super random hookup. It all went down in Uncanny X-Men issue number 435 when She-Hulk was representing Juggernaut in the court of law. The ship was considered so abhorrent that years later, She-Hulk actually denied that it ever happened. In the 2005 She-Hulk series in issue 21, it was claimed that an alternate version of She-Hulk from Earth 721, who had been on vacation and impersonating her 616 counterpart, was actually the one who did the deed. And She-Hulk stands by that to this day. She's like, it wasn't me, it was an alternate version of me. I would never do that. But people are like, what's the real story, She-Hulk? What really happened? I believe her. I believe She-Hulk. She would admit to it if she did it. That's what I think. What are some of your favorite weird ex couples? Who do you think are the worst or the best together?
Number 10. Deadpool and Spider-Man. Hold up, you're angrily typing. They're not together. Spideypool isn't real. It's not canon. How dare you? Well, hold on a moment. Spideypool may not be canonically in your face. They're not banging in the sky like some people on this list will be later on. But Deadpool has an open and acknowledged crush on Spidey. He loves him and will do anything for him. It's currently manifesting as a desire to be his friend and prove himself to be a good enough person to be said friend. And as for Spideypool, well, fans shipping of this couple is a big part of why these two got their own team-up comic, which lasted for 50 issues by the way, since it proved there was demand and an audience for it. There are many different sides of fandom and they impact it in different ways. Now when I say Deadpool will do anything, I mean anything, literally. He'll go to hell and back, let himself be stabbed, decapitated, and more, just for the hope that Spidey will spend more than 5 minutes with him. And he can be insulting him those whole 5 minutes, he'll take anything. So how is this too far? Well, when you're getting killed by the person you want to spend time with, but still are hanging out with them after, it goes too far. Sometimes it's just hard to read and it exacerbates Deadpool's instability at times. This arc ended with them going on a meta camping trip and Deadpool learning his identity, but oh snap, not really. Also there was a Gwenpool crossover and then they arrested the writer. Unless you love meta-ness, this whole thing was too far. Number 9. Batman and Black Canary. Sex. This is from All-Star Batman and Robin. So Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin has become infamous at this point. From the goddamn Batman line, to Robin being forced to eat rats, to the yellow room, to the non-smiling Joker full back tattoo. And one of the things that happened during all of this was Batman and Black Canary having sex while the corpses of people they had beaten up, or rather soon to be corpses since the building was on fire, well yeah, just sex right by that. So just them banging beside that. How could you do that? It would smell so bad. Why did this happen? Well, why not? I mean, this is the comic where when the instructions between writer and artist leaked, or were released, Frank was demanding a full-on butt panel where the word balloons came from the butt and the instructions were to make him drool. So yeah, I'm not surprised this happened. Perhaps the worst thing about this whole comic was Miller becoming aware it was a meme and deciding to play into it, which wasn't always for the best. Number 8. Superman and Wonder Woman. So Superman and Wonder Woman have been toyed with as a couple for decades, and in the New 52, they just were a couple. But there have been times when these two together have gone too far. They're a power couple alright, but that's not always a good thing. So in the sequel to The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, Superman and Wonder Woman meet up in the sky for some sky sex, as you do. And well, it happens, and Wonder Woman proclaims, "It's so good, she's pregnant again." Instantly pregnant. That was a thing that happened, and it just breaks all mood or tone. Although people tend not to like the sequel as much as the first one anyway. However, more along the lines of going too far, we have Superman and Red Sun, the Elseworlds tale where Superman is raised in Soviet Russia and becomes a communist hero instead as a result. So here he ends up with Wonder Woman, who is impressed by him and falls for him, and ends up actually doing much of what he says without question, which leads to some questionable actions, especially as in the comic it's framed as they're pretty much oppressors. However, it all comes to a head when Superman commands her to break through her own lasso of truth, which was binding her, which breaks her. She's never the same after. So too far. When you break one half of the couple, too far. Number 7. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Why hello Ultimate Verse, we meet again, but not for the last time. This is 1610, the Ultimate Verse, a universe started by Marvel in 2000 to attempt to entice new readers who may be scared off by Marvel's long backlog of canon, but they also decided to do things differently, different origins, etc. So one of the changes that took place was that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, twins, were in a relationship together. Why? Well, because. It was meant to build some pathos for Wanda, and because they could. And then they would get salty at Cap for not getting or liking their relationship. Pushing boundaries for no reason, well, that's going too far. Number 6. Superman and Power Girl. Yes, more incest. Hooray! Why not? This is about going too far after all. But now that I said that, there's gonna be at least one person who's like, how dare you? This is perfectly valid. Well, I brought it on myself. Superman and Power Girl, they're cousins. Now this is more of a passing thing, but it still warrants being brought up, as well Power Girl kisses Superman as a distraction tactic during a fight between the JSA and the JLA. She full on licks him. So a couple of things. 1, cousins, ew. And 2, she's Power Girl. She has the strength of Krypton. She doesn't need to resort to kissing as a distraction. Even when she's not Kryptonian, depending upon the canon, she's still really powerful. I mean, if the boob window isn't enough to distract, it's time for another tactic, because something is clearly not working. Number 5, Reed and Sue. So Reed and Sue, for all their difficulties, do love each other and have a solid foundation and work together as a unit. So it is actually here that they go too far, which is something their own daughter Valeria accuses them of when she leaves to go live with Doom, her godfather, whom she calls Uncle Victor. She notes that her mother in particular co-signs her father's more questionable behaviors by staying with him, his cache of weapons to take out most of the major players in the Marvel Universe, the secrets he's kept from their very allies and friends, while he by contrast puts up with her almost dalliances and, well, her full-on emotional affair with Namor. The 2018 comic can say it's not canon all at once. I've read all the runs, and they were a thing. Sometimes standing by your man can make you end up co-signing some things, unless she's all for it, which would make sense. I mean, she wouldn't stay otherwise. A lot of this has changed now though, because the Fantastic Four have a more altered, different dynamic now, mostly Reed. Why do I want to see Reed with the Maker? Why do I want this? What's wrong with me? Send help. Number 4, Angel and Husk. This relationship is one that fans cannot really get behind, well, a lot of them, and it's also from a run that many don't particularly like. This was from the Uncanny X-Men and the storyline She Lies with Angels, and they really mean it, although they should have said She Flies with Angels. So there was always contention about this couple because of the age gap for some, this being between Angel, Warren Worthington, and Husk, Warren Worthington III. But then he spends the night talking to her mom, and she's all, why are you torturing yourself? Is it the age gap? Because I don't care, I ship it. But he's all, no, all the people I love died. And then Paige, that's Husk, comes in and is all, that's my decision. And they end up fighting outside in front of everyone. And he's all, I could love you more than Betsy. That's Psylocke. And wow, is that romantic? I guess so. They end up banging in the sky, full on, in front of the X-Men and her mom. Why would you do that? Too far. Number 3, Cyclops and Emma Frost. So Emma Frost and Cyclops' relationship begins as a psychic affair where she was counseling him over some of his, well, conflicting feelings about Jean and the Phoenix and everything that happened there. But she would also pretend to be Jean in these sessions, and stuff happened. However, at the end of that arc, Jean is all, you two can be together. And so they are, and they become quite the couple. And while Emma's anti-hero-ness combined with Cyclops' leadership style, abrasive, and his willingness to be clandestine and his more bitter approach after some reveals about Xavier, these two become quite a dangerous couple, a force to be reckoned with. When they make moves, the Marvel Universe is changed. Emma even uses Cyclops after his death as a psychic projection for their purposes. It's all pretty dark, and yet they work as a couple. Unpopular opinion, but I think they matched better than him and Jean. What are your thoughts? I'm sure you're leaving them down below. Number 2, Scarlet Witch and Vision. Scarlet Witch and Vision have quite the tangled web of relationship and history that has been polarizing for the very writers at Marvel, which led to some of the things that happen in the overall Marvel Universe. So Vision has the brain patterns of Wonder Man, Scarlet Witch's previous romantic interest. It's the baseline of his interest in her, though it moves beyond that. These two, well, she's tried to destroy him more than once. Then there was the removal of their non-existent children at the time. It was more complicated now that children exist. It's a whole thing. Some of this was caused because writers hated their marriage. Comics are full of marriage haters. They feel it stagnates characters. I hope they aren't married, because if I was their partner, my feelings would be hurt. Feeling stagnant? Enjoy the couch. Not even the couch, the floor. The floor builds character. Vision modeled his robot wife's brainwaves off of Wanda, by the way. This whole thing is so tangled, and we got things like Avengers Disassembled and House of M, partially as a result of this romance. But they are iconic, but at the same time, yeah, it went a bit too far. And number 1, Batman and Batgirl. So we're actually not going to talk about the rooftop sex that happened in the expanded beginning of The Killing Joke. We're going to talk about the expanded DCAU verse in the comics, where the idea of a crush and then relationship between these two took full form, despite Barbara at first being a romantic interest for Dick. I can hear you snickering. Stop it. So Bruce and Barbara would date, and for a while it would be a bit of an affair, and the Batman Beyond verse, it would be revealed that he had gotten Barbara pregnant, and she would actually end up miscarrying during a fight. This would be the start, well, the second start of the rift between Bruce and Dick, as well as the rift between him and Barbara, and rift between everybody. Everybody's got a rift now. Why did this happen? It's not a terrible plot line, but it's who's in it. Miscarriage for shock value. Too far. So those were 10 times that superhero couples went too far. What times can you think of?
Picking up the list at number 10, we have Squirrel Girl and Wolverine. Doreen Green made her comic book debut in Marvel Superheroes Volume 2, Issue 8. See, back in the early 90s, she was born with these fantastic squirrel abilities, including a tail to complete the picture. In the new Avengers Volume 2, Issue 7, the two of them have a brief interaction that hints that they could have been romantically involved at one point. There's some tension in the air, that's for sure. They're talking about being professional and also how amazing they look too. That's already enough evidence in my mind, but to make things even more interesting, later on in Wolverine Volume 4, Issue 8, Doreen is seen in Wolverine's mindscape with Emma Frost, Mystique, Spiral, and Jewel. This was the sexual fantasies room, so I mean, proof's in the pudding, guys. Number 9, Crystal and Quicksilver. In Fantastic Four, Issue 45, Johnny Storm met Crystal, sister of Medusa, and they hit it off naturally. Johnny thought she was straight out of a fairy tale, and once they showed each other their powers, well, love. Love comes next, of course. The Fantastic Four needed a replacement temporarily while Sue was recovering from having their first child, so this Inhuman, Crystal, was looking to fill that spot. So Johnny and Crystal dated after this, and Crystal was front cover by time Fantastic Four issue 81 rolled around. And then in Avengers 104, after a battle with a Sentinel, Quicksilver gets hurt. So Crystal brought him back to her homeworld to heal him, and while they were there, the two of them ended up kind of falling in love. Everything happens fast in Pietro's life. If I was Johnny, I'd have a few choice words for him, that's for sure. And before we continue on with this list of weird superhero couples, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help us a lot, especially while we're working from home. Those thumbs up really add up and help us out. You guys are the best, thank you so much. Now let's get right back into this list. Enough wasting time. Number 8, Toad and Husk. When Toad was amongst the lucky few to have kept their powers after the events of M-Day, he didn't save the world one day at a time. Instead, he became a janitor at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. He kept the school clean, he kept the kids on track. And then when the Phoenix Force approached Earth, Quentin Quire fell from the sky and Toad leaped far and wide to catch him. This impressed Husk quite a bit. So she quit the school thinking Kitty would just fire her anyways, and then she joined the Hellfire Academy later on, and she kind of made Toad betray the school once they started clicking. She's a little aggressive in her ways, some would say. Relationships have their ups and downs, but this is just another level. Because at the end of this 5-part roller coaster of emotions, Paige didn't even remember the entire thing. Poor Paige. And also poor Toad. I mean, he's gripping that mop tighter and tighter every day. All 5 parts are really fun. This relationship is nuts. I'd love to have Toad come and clean my place, just hang out, keep me in line, you know, he'd be nice. Number 7. Thor and Jane Foster. When it comes to Norse mythology, Thor's wife is Lady Sif. Now in the comics, it's a bit more complicated than that. They were on and off for a while, and I feel like we're gonna get a love triangle in the MCU soon. I mean, it's confirmed that Lady Sif and Jane Foster are both returning in Thor: Love and Thunder. So this could lead to a little triangle of romance, who knows? In Journey into Mystery issue 102, Thor had fallen in love with Lady Sif. So much so that when Sif had been kidnapped by storm giants and ended up as a prisoner of Hela, Thor volunteered as tribute. He actually wanted to trade lives. And Hela was so impressed, she was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let you both go. That's love. I don't know what to do here. And then in Thor issue 236, Sif sacrificed her own life in order to save Jane's. See, Jane in the comics became Thor, but her cancer got worse every time she got mighty and used the powers of Thor. So maybe the reality gem in the MCU has caused some life-altering effects to Jane, and then Lady Sif can somehow be the only one to save her at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder. Wouldn't that be sad? That would be sad, actually. Yeah, that'd be kind of pretty sad. I say this is a weird couple because the MCU has treaded lightly around it. Why Jane is the love interest at all beats me. I mean, the long distance alone, that would be enough for me to be like, nope, bye. Number 6, Kitty Pryde and Colossus. When people say age is just a number, that's like a couple years we're talking about. Maybe you're in your late 20s, you meet somebody in their early 30s. It's not that far off, but it sounds far off. That's what we're talking about when we say age is just a number. When it comes to Marvel romances, the whole age thing is a little gross. It's kind of gross. When the first two met in X-Men issue 129, she's said to be like 13 years old. They're trying to recruit her to go to Professor X's school, and Colossus is like 18 at the time, or somewhere around 20. He's like an adult. Now, in the Days of Future Past storyline, beginning in X-Men issue 151, we see Kitty and Colossus married in that future. So that's nice. I think. It's nice to know that they really are head over heels for each other. It kind of helps, especially when it started with their first kiss during a space mission, and right before they kiss, Kitty even says, gee, I wish I was older, and Colossus is like, so do I, and then proceeds to kiss her anyways. Number 5, Iron Man and Gamora. If you put 2008 Tony Stark in a room with Gamora, like pre-Pepper Potts, I guarantee you that guy would at least turn on the charm. The idea doesn't come out of nowhere though. I mean, Tony and Gamora, believe it or not, have hooked up before. So the panel starts with Gamora being all coy and cool. She says the line, well, you're gonna have to do much better out here. And Tony responds in his classic Tony Stark manner, I can do better. And then it immediately cuts to Tony laying next to her in bed. They look like they just had the time of their lives. Tony's all tucked in the blanket. He looks shell-shocked. Gamora's pretty chill about it. She's like, hey, I'm gonna go back to the bar. See ya. And then Tony's like, cool, true. And then after she leaves, Tony lets out the slightest, ow. Yeah, you don't say. It's probably gonna be a painful one. Number 4, Spider-Man and Black Cat. Peter Parker and Felicia Hardy, one of the more interesting relationships in Peter's life. Well, rather, Spider-Man's life. And there's a difference here between the two. You'll see. So she entered comics back in 1979 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 194. Now, when she met Spider-Man, they were, of course, both in costume. She fell for him, his charm, his quips. She could tell that he was a kind soul, and she trusted him. It was turning into quite the romance between the two, and eventually Peter felt like the time was right and revealed his true self. He unmasked himself. And she had a tough time accepting the fact that he was just an average kid under the mask. Should have left the mask on, Pete. Rough. I mean, looks really don't matter, but when you're a superhero, it's probably different. It's probably different. This is taken to the next level in the Ultimate Comics. When Black Cat finds out that Spider-Man's just a kid, she literally throws up all over him. So sometimes it's better to keep things a mystery, I think. Number 3, Wolverine and Lin's son. This next one happens in the 4-parter Wolverine Manifest Destiny. So when Wolverine was in Chinatown, San Francisco, he saved a woman named Lin from the crime lord, the Black Dragon. Now she refers to him as her lover in issue 3. Things are cooking, nice. Now what Wolverine doesn't realize is that by successfully taking out the Black Dragon, which he did, Logan now has to take that spot. He becomes that role. So naturally he refused, but by refusing, that upset Lin. To quit would be dishonorable to everybody. So while he was leaving, she stabbed him in the eye with a spear, warning him not to return. So when the X-Men relocated to San Francisco, he took a trip down memory lane and returned, but this time Lin was not the same. Lin is dead, lover, she says. You killed her a long time ago. And she goes on to explain how now she is the Black Dragon, Queen of the Triads, Empress of the Chinatown underworld. Wolverine took over as the new Black Dragon and Lin escaped through the sewers, holding the same spearhead. Number 2, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Of course I'm gonna mention this couple on this list. From the Ultimate Universe, this is one of the weirder ones. In the 3rd issue of the Ultimates, the Wasp is like, man, those two sure do love each other, those siblings. And then Cap's like, well, of course they do. They're family, they're siblings. Even in the 1st issue, like way back in the original X-Men, Pietro tells Toad to stop chewing so loudly in front of his sister. They're close. But in the 3rd issue, the Wasp is like, dude, he loves her, like, loves her. And then Captain America makes the same face that readers did at that point. Yeah, that's a weird one. Number 1, Wolverine and MJ. The Ultimate Universe has some interesting elements, as we just heard, and after Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, it got even more weird when Wolverine and Spider-Man switched bodies. Mesmero switched their bodies, so Peter was like, hey man, I really need you to go to school. We've seen these Freaky Friday change-up style movies before. The whole fun is pretending to be the other person and trying to blend in with their lives. That's where the comedy comes from, right? This sounds like a hilarious adventure ready to happen, but while Wolverine was in Peter's body, he at one point ended up kissing Mary Jane. And it's made out like he even wants to date her, like he wants to go further after the kiss. MJ told him that she wants to wait until they're older for that kind of thing though, so thankfully, nothing happened during this change up. But the kiss and the idea in the first place, yuck, you know? Yuck. I was gonna save Hulk Gang for number 1, but creepy Wolverine takes the cake.
Number 10, Rogue and Sentry. You know I love the Sentry, but when he was retconned into comic lore, not everything that came with his history was great. Namely his relationship that apparently happened with Rogue. In Sentry Fallen Sun, all the supers are gathered at Robert and Lindy's grave. The epitaph on their joint tombstone under their names even reads, "Together forever." Such a sweet sentiment. But in this comic, we learn that apparently Sentry's power made him immune to Rogue's power-absorbing abilities, meaning that she was able to touch him without any fear. She confesses this, bursts into tears, and runs off as everybody is sharing memories that they had with Sentry, leaving Cyclops to pretty much confirm that Rogue and Sentry were intimate. Apparently, Rogue had just confessed this to her X-Men family on the way over, but Robert was, of course, married to Lindy, which means I guess he cheated on his wife with Rogue, unless this happened before they were married? Anyways, it's a really weird wrench to just throw into Rogue's already challenging sex life. She doesn't have enough problems, jeez. Wonder if Lindy knew and was cool with it. Maybe Lindy was there, who knows? Oh my gosh, now I'm imagining all these things. Number 9, Homelander and Becca Butcher. While Becca might not be a superhero herself, and some would see Homelander as a supervillain, Vought would obviously have us believe otherwise. While Becca's story is a lot darker in the comics, things are still taken too far with her in the television series based off the comics. In the comics and the series, Billy believes that Becca has been raped by Homelander, which ultimately caused her death. It's his motivation for vengeance on the supers. However, in the television series, they take it in a different direction. Instead, in the show, Becca was actually having an affair with Homelander, and she managed to give birth to the child that they conceived together. Whether she lives or dies, the relationship is definitely taken too far. But in the television series, I would say the relationship is even more shocking, as it leaves Becca in a very bizarre position where she also seems still pretty terrified of Homelander, even though she had an affair with him. And this also shatters Billy's motivation, and it leaves the audience wanting to know more. It's just well written. Just a cool twist. Twisty twist. Number 8. Black Widow and Spider-Man. Okay, so this relationship that I'm talking about is from one panel. But trust me, this one panel is the only one you will need for these two. I'm of course referring to the little one-shot panels in What If Volume 1, Issue 34. I love these one-shot little panels of what ifs. Like, what if Dazzler had decided to become a lawyer? Or what if Dr. Doom had a sense of humor? The panel I'm specifically talking about, though, poses the daydream of what if Spider-Man had married the Black Widow, which apparently would have resulted in cannibalism. Burp. All you really need to say about that. Cannibalism is always too far. When you've gone there, you can't go back, because one of you is probably dead. Number 7. Gambit and Mystique. So, while this relationship didn't specifically go anywhere, the attempt in and of itself was so messed up that I actually had to mention it. In the comic series X-Men, Gambit ends up becoming attracted to X-Men student Fox while he's with Rogue. He does his best to avoid Fox and remain loyal, truly wanting to be with Rogue and Rogue only, but still, Rogue ends up feeling insecure and getting jealous. I mean, if you couldn't touch your one true love, but everyone else was able to, I'm sure you would feel pretty insecure too. While jealousy is not necessarily abnormal when it comes to any relationship, and nothing happens between Gambit and Fox, it is later revealed that this wasn't even Fox, but was actually Mystique in disguise. That's what takes this too far. Mystique sees Rogue as a daughter, and Rogue sees Mystique as her adoptive mother. And yet, apparently, Mystique claims she was hitting on Gambit for Rogue's own good, trying to prove that he wasn't good enough for Rogue, to protect her daughter. You know, disapproving of your child's partner is one thing, trying to sleep with said partner to prove your point is kind of another. Kinda gross. Don't do that. Number 6. Black Widow and Iron Man. In the Ultimates universe, Black Widow is not a very super person. She ends up being a spy working with the Liberators to betray the Avengers and clear a way for the Liberators' invasion. But even if we don't go into that whole plot point, Tony and Natasha still manage to take it too far. Tony and Natasha start dating, and shortly after, Tony proposes to her. He trusts his new bride a little too much, even gifting her her very own set of Iron Man armor. Even after the betrayal comes up and Black Widow is killed by Hawkeye, we later find out that Tony and Natasha had a sex tape. Yeah, they made a sex tape, which ends up getting circulated after Natasha's death. For this relationship being taken too far, I really blame the Ultimates universe. But to be honest, Ultimates often takes everything a little too far. It's what we both love and hate about it. Number 5. Gambit and Belladonna. This star-crossed love story ends very badly for one of these two, but in all, it's pretty much tragic all around. Before Gambit fell in love with Rogue, he had a childhood sweetheart, Belladonna Boudreaux. The two became friends when they were little, not knowing that they came from rival guilds, the Thieves Guild and the Assassins Guild. Over the year, the rivalry became ever more violent, and as such, their fathers arranged a marriage between the two, which they hoped would help to bring both guilds together in harmony. However, soon after they were married, Bella's brother challenged Remy to a duel. I think you can see where we're going here. The Romeo and Juliet mirrored story of their love ended up leaving Remy banished, and Bella mistaken for dead, though we later found out that she was just in a coma. Things only got worse for Bella from there. She was revived, but Rogue accidentally touched her, which caused Bella to lose all of her memories. This caused Gambit to leave her, and he would end up leaving Bella more than once. Ouch. Guess Belladonna was no Rogue for him, sadly. Number 4. Lady Shiva and David Kane. This relationship went too far right from the beginning. Before Lady Shiva was Lady Shiva, she was Sandra Wusan, a practiced martial artist who performed and trained with her sister Carolyn. David Kane, member of the League of Assassins, came to watch them perform one time and felt that Carolyn was holding Sandra back. Believing Sandra to be his true soulmate, he kindly killed Carolyn for her. This obviously upset Sandra dramatically, who swore vengeance for her sister's death. She tracked Kane down, but was ambushed by the League of Assassins. She was defeated, and it was then that she realized just how much her sister had held her back. Kane offered to spare her life if she would agree to bear his child and leave the baby for him to raise. And Sandra agreed. Pretty weird. She trained with the League and set out an hour after her baby was born. Only within the League of Assassins could this weird story be conceived. But hey, we got Cassandra Cain out of it, so Number 3, Aviax and a dinosaur. Sounds so ridiculous just even reading that. The comic series The Wanderers saw this really odd pairing happen. The Wanderers are a cosmic superhero team who were created to be a group of allies to the superhero team, the Legion of Superheroes. They are tasked with helping to save a species on a prehistoric planet filled with dinosaurs where everything is going extinct. To ensure the diversity of the species on the planet despite mass extinction and protect the life there, Aviax, who is a shapeshifter, comes up with the brilliant idea to mate with a bird-like dinosaur, passing on his genes, which are immune to the radioactive fog that appears to be attacking the planet. Most of the team are on board with this brilliant plan, and so Aviax does just that. Sure, he's saving a species, but also they leave before ever confirming that this actually works. It does end up working, of course, and we the readers know that, but as soon as this deed is done, Aviax just runs back to his teammates. The comics even go into the whole mating ritual between Aviax and the dinosaur. No. It's really weird. Number 2, Cable and Copycat. Cable and Domino become a really big deal in the comics. Their relationship echoed that of other famous and adorable mutant couples like Gambit and Rogue or Jean and Scott. The two became quickly inseparable, and this would have been all well and good until the writers decided that this was not actually Domino, but shapeshifter Copycat in her guise. Copycat had actually been tasked with blowing up X-Force's headquarters and killing Cable, but during her time as Domino, she kind of became fond of him, because they had a whole relationship. Deadpool was then sent to confirm that Copycat followed through on her orders. This resulted in Copycat's betrayal being revealed, though she still attempted to protect her teammates. Despite her trying to help, X-Force headquarters was blown up, with both Copycat and X-Force actually getting away. But while physically he was intact, these events shattered Cable's emotional life for a little while. Poor Cable. Number 1, Miss Marvel and Marcus. Sorry friends, we are going there. To the Avengers issue 200, where we shockingly discovered that Miss Marvel was unknowingly pregnant. After the delivery and telling her fellow teammates that she felt used and confused in regards to this newborn baby and how it came about, her son grows rapidly into an adult man. He calls himself Marcus, and this man reveals the story of his origins, telling a story of how he was a Mortis's and an unnamed woman's son. The unnamed woman herself looked a lot like Carol. Creepy. He found himself trapped in limbo after his mother left and his father vanished. So he came up with a plan to escape. He found a woman from Earth who he felt attracted to as she resembled his mother. That's actually in the comics. I'm not kidding. This woman ended up being Carol Danvers herself. He attempted to woo her, but when she resisted his charms, he was forced to use his powers to make her fall in love with him. Obviously. The dude had some weird non-consensual space sex where Marcus impregnated Miss Marvel with his essence. He returned Miss Marvel to Earth, where he was then born from her. Not belonging to this realm of existence, things start getting really weird on Earth because of his presence. So he decides that he actually has to return to Limbo, realizing that he does not belong on Earth and that mayhaps he was destined to forever be alone. Conflicted, as her mind is still kinda brainwashed, Carol feels like maybe she should return with Marcus, as she still feels the effects of his influence, and says that she feels even closer to him because he is also now her son. Because he's also now her son! The Avengers stand aside and bid Carol adieu, letting her ride off into the sunset with her rapist. Don't worry though, the X-Men do come to her aid after she manages to escape Marcus, and she rightfully gets to chew out the Avengers for willfully abandoning her. The story is so messed up. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope this list made you cringe in the best and worst of ways. Are there any superhero couples that have gone too far and still have yet to be mentioned?
Number 10, Sabretooth and Mystique. Did somebody say toxic? Take one highly violent beast man with a knack and enjoyment for ending lives and hurting people, and pair it with a slippery, manipulative, identity-stealing shapeshifter, and it's bound to be a recipe for disaster. But yet they try and try again. The pair even have a son together, Graydon Creed, and because of them, he absolutely despises mutants. Way to go, Mom and Dad. Their relationships together almost always include some kind of mental or physical torment, and I hope to the one above all that no one has these two as their couple goals. Number 9, Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. So you're Cyclops, right? The red-headed woman you love, Jean Grey, she goes cray-cray and ends up apparently de-lifing on the moon. You're distraught, broken up. You leave your team of letter X-themed compatriots, and then along comes another fiery red-headed woman who is the exact copy, some could even say clone, of your long-lost love. What do? If you said marry that lookalike at the drop of a hat, then yes, you really are Cyclops. The Mr. Sinister created clone of Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, got married to this heartbroken Cyclops within like a month. And they even created a little baby in the form of Cable. Then what do you know? Jean Grey shows back up and Cyclops drops his new wife and the baby about as fast as he married her. Cyclops, you giant weirdo. Number 8, Angel and Husk. A few entries on this list have to do with age differences, but most of the other couples who have a huge age gap at least have a tiny bit of decency. The same cannot be said for 30-year-old Warren Worthington III and his 19-year-old girlfriend, Paige Guthrie, otherwise known as Husk. The age difference is large for sure, but it's not the biggest gap we've seen. The real problem comes with an extremely uncomfortable moment in Uncanny X-Men number 440, when Warren and Paige fully give in to their love for each other. In the sky, in front of Paige's mom, who Warren was just explaining the situation to. It's awkward as hell. And then to make it kind of more hilarious / worse, the bad guys show up on the ground while they are mid-air sans clothing. Whole new meaning to PDA right there. Number 7, Hawkeye and Mockingbird. With the inclusion of Clint Barton's family in the MCU, non-comic book fans might be surprised to know that his family wasn't really a thing in the comics. Not until the Ultimate Universe version of the character came around. The MCU Hawk family may be an attempt to get away from the awful couple of Hawkeye and Mockingbird, which honestly sort of seems like a cheap way of capitalizing on the Green Arrow and Black Canary coupling that DC had going on. But these two were nowhere near as compatible as the DC counterparts. The best example of that would be the whole thing surrounding a guy called Phantom Rider. Mockingbird is caught and physically mistreated by Phantom Rider, and she eventually gets her revenge, taking the Rider's life. Now Hawkeye, instead of supporting his traumatized partner, is scared off by the fact that she de-lifed her assailant, and he splits up with her. While that could maybe be understandable, it all got retconned so that Mockingbird actually got with Phantom Rider by her own consent. So then, when she took his life for seemingly no reason it seems, Hawkeye just used the killing as an excuse when the real reason was because she cheated. Kinda weird, I don't know. Number 6, Havoc and Nurse Annie. This one is kind of just strange to me. For starters, this relationship is based on nothing other than a nurse doing her job. When the mutant Havoc was put into a coma, his nurse, Annie Gazikanian, whose name I think I utterly butchered and who I shall now refer to as Nurse Annie, was the one who cared for him. During the time she was caring for Alex Summers, she actually fell in love with him and even moved to the Xavier Institute to continue that care. I should also add, Nurse Annie was particularly anti-mutant, being pretty passive-aggressive at times with that sentiment too. So it was interesting that when the Summers brother came back too, he reciprocated the love that this nurse imparted on her unconscious patient. So much so that he even left his fiancée, Polaris, a fiancée whom he had a great relationship with that no one had a problem with, who is the daughter of an incredibly powerful mutant, Magneto. A fiancée who he not only left, but left at the altar to pursue a relationship with a mutant disliking nurse who even occasionally went about kissing Bobby Drake. Can you imagine how long Havoc and Nurse Annie lasted? That's right, not very long. Number 5, Rogue and Magneto. I always think of Rogue being with Remy LeBeau, Gambit. Their relationship is iconic. It has its issues, but it endures it all. Her relationship in the Age of Apocalypse story, however, I do not like. Age of Apocalypse was an awesome alternate dimension story, and I love it. Except for this one thing that just makes me uncomfy. Rogue in this world is a freedom fighter working with Magneto's X-Men, and her friend, Wanda Maximoff, passes on. She makes a promise to be a companion to the Master of Magnetism himself. The two grew closer and closer. This young woman and the 60-year-old leader of the team. So close so that she even chose him over Gambit, leaving Gambit to pass away. She then married Magneto and even had a son with him. She married her best friend's dad because said friend's dying wish was to be his companion. I don't care if their powers cancel each other out or whatever the reason is. It's weird and it's strange and it feels unnatural. And I ain't here for it, people. I ain't here for it. Number 4, Multiple Man and Siren. How can you trust a man who can be in multiple places at once? acts. That's honestly all I should have to say, but for context on why you actually can't, the mutant Jamie Madrox, otherwise known as Multiple Man, was in a relationship with the daughter of Banshee, Teresa Cassidy. And one fateful night, he got much too intoxicated, and using his abilities, he was able to have conjugal experiences with both his wife and another woman, their teammate Monese Croix, or M, at the same time. And then he completely forgot which one he had been with. For some reason, Teresa forgave him, but then she got pregnant, with the baby turning out to just be another multiple of Jamie, who was then reabsorbed back into Jamie's body. What the hell? Number 3, Ultimate Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. We don't want any of this here, please and thank you. Look, Wanda and Pietro Maximoff have been close, always. It's led to some truly awesome and horrible comic book moments. There's no doubting they love each other as siblings, and that didn't need to change, okay? I understand Marvel was making its Ultimate Universe in a way to make it more realistic and to make their characters just as hateable as they can be without losing readers' interest. But this was just as unnecessary as having the Blob eat Janet Van Dyne. And then you made Wolverine, who was hinted to be their father, come and do some creepy spying on the weird brother-sister couple enact. Why, man? Why? Number 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Probably the only relationship on this list that actually ended a comic book character's comic book career. This relationship was bad from the beginning, and that can largely land on Hank Pym's increasingly tiny shoulders. Or large shoulders if he's growing, I don't know. From the moment comic book fans saw him strike his wife and partner, Janet Van Dyne, there was no real saving him. Comic book sales for Ant-Man even took a dip after it happened. Just take the fact that he actually kidnapped her to try and get the relationship to marriage in the first place, and the fact that it worked, and you gotta know this is a bad duo. Sure, Hank Pym has a whole host of mental problems that leads to his codependency and the psychological and physical mistreatment he inflicts on his on-again, off-again lover. But the Wasp, she should absolutely know better than to stay with this lunatic. And in at number 1 is Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy. This is 100% the creepiest entry on this list, and I don't care who you are or what you say. The Spider-Man story, Sins of the Past, contains within its strange pages the revelation that Gwen Stacy, Peter's former lover and a teenager, was having an ongoing affair with Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, a very creepy, full-grown man old enough to be her father. Not only was she even having an affair, it even resulted with Gwen secretly giving birth to twins. Twins that became a pair of assassins. I do not recommend reading this story because all you'll be able to see when you close your eyes is the incredibly creepy image of Norman and his Green Goblin face as he is laying on top of Gwen. I can't talk about this anymore, I'm getting the creeps. Let's wrap this up now, please. Alrighty, now we have seen 10 of Marvel's worst couples. Got any more suggestions? Leave them in the comments.
Coming in at number 10, we have Killer Croc and the Enchantress, a couple that's definitely at least a little weird, but is getting more of an honorable mention slot because they're just so dang cute together. With one of them being a cannibalistic crocodile-human hybrid and the other consisting of 2 magical identities trapped in the same body, these 2 lovebirds found one another while they were both locked in Belle Rev prison and recruited to the infamous Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad. With Croc even going so far to romantically say, "I want to eat everyone, but I don't want to eat you," this is a couple that managed to show that even supervillains can find a little happiness every now and then.
Number 9, White Rabbit and Arcade. This relationship was weird in the sense that it was not very healthy, and both of these two seemed to really only end up together because they were both villains. I also think it's strange that White Rabbit allowed herself to often be degraded and insulted by Arcade when normally Lorena Dodson is a very willful woman who, despite not being the best villain around, is extremely independent, preferring to call the shots herself. The other side of this is that Arcade prides himself on his brilliant mind, and White Rabbit isn't really known for her wits. She's more known for her thematic appearance and, like I said, her willfulness. So what really brought these two together? I don't know. But in the end, it definitely was not enough to keep them together. They seem to appear romantically attached in Claws, but break up at the end of that miniseries. However, they seemingly team up again for some reason in Claws 2, which also of course doesn't end well for these villains. What do you expect when you go up against Black Cat and Wolverine. Don't even try to take those two on. It's not a good idea.
Coming in at number 8, we've got the Ultimate Marvel Universe's more villainous versions of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. And yes, before you ask, they are still siblings in this universe, so yeah, there's some real icky Game of Thrones stuff going on. Abandoning their father, Magneto, and joining up with this universe's superhero team, the Ultimates, this version of Pietro and Wanda are just as close as the main Marvel Universe's siblings, but in a much grosser way. And with this version of Wanda eventually being killed by a love-struck Ultron and driving the grieving Pietro to madness, let's just say it's probably a good idea the MCU decided to go in a very different direction.
Number 7, Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed. Yeah, we're going to the Power Rangers for this one. Why? Well, because I love the Power Rangers. Also, I kind of love this couple, even though they're definitely weird. No? I mean, honestly, imagining Rita in a relationship with anyone is just really strange for me. Lord Zed became Rita's nemesis when it came to villainy and her position as the Power Rangers' #1 enemy, which is kind of what brought these two together. Of course, it wasn't a love at first sight scenario, but more of a love in order to get you to join me so I can have all of the power scenario. How did Rita make Zed fall head over heels for her? Well, with a love potion, of course. But over time, these two actually came to care for one another and even went on to have a child together named Thrax, although some people theorize that Thrax was actually born before they were even married. Thrax in turn would inherit his parents' love of villainy and become an enemy of the Power Rangers himself in the future.
Coming in at number 6, we have the crazed killer combo of Carnage and Shriek. A mutant with a tortured backstory and the ability to control sound waves to devastating results, Shriek felt all alone in the world until she met the infamous serial killer Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage. Breaking out of prison together, Shriek saw herself as the matriarch of the criminal family created during their breakout and has often returned to Carnage's side after his many defeats over the years. While Carnage himself often did seem to experience his own twisted form of romance towards Shriek, he most recently gave up any chance at love when he betrayed Shriek in order to help summon the symbiote god Null. It was far from a happy ending for a far from happy couple.
Number 5, Harley Quinn and Rick Flag. Basically, many Suicide Squad relationships are weird, even ones that we end up loving like Enchantress and Killer Croc. And of course, this relationship here is no exception. Granted, Rick Flag is more hero than villain, and Harley is currently on the path to being more of a hero in the comics, but I don't think she's quite there yet. And despite her heroic intentions, I think many of us still consider her to be coming from the villain camp. She's trying her best to make amends, but hey, there's a lot of bad things Harley has done in the past, and even some of her methods as a hero, or an anti-hero if you will, are considered questionable. Something else that is questionable? This whole relationship. The one thing it has going for it is that Rick and Harley both seem aware of how bizarre it is and how it can never really work out between them. But still, some of the wording, especially from Flag, feels like weirdly forced. There's dialogue here that I'm like, I don't really know. Also, the two of them together seem to have terrible timing when it comes to getting intimate. See issue number 18 of the 2016 Suicide Squad, part of the Rebirth continuity, to see what I'm talking about.
Coming in at number 4, we have Lex Luthor and the Parasite, although this is a couple that would probably rather forget their brief time together. During a period in Superman's life in which he and Lois Lane were already going through a bit of a rough patch in their marriage, the supervillain Parasite kidnapped Lois and took her place, manipulating her relationship with Clark even further. Part of the Parasite's scheme culminates in him, while appearing as Lois, seducing Lex Luthor into giving the Parasite what he wants, with Lex being none the wiser as to this fake Lois Lane's identity. And while this is pretty yikes from a consent perspective, even for a supervillain, both Lex and the Parasite have since worked together on various supervillain related schemes, so who knows, maybe those two just treat it like an awkward night between flirty friends. Let the record state, I ship these two baldies.
Number 3, Enchantress and Keep. These two are very strange together. Marvel's Enchantress ends up creating Keep in order to battle Thor. As such, being her creation, Keep is also kind of like her son, but then she also gets busy with the Keep, which is a whole weird thing that is really confusing. Adding to the bizarreness of this whole relationship, Keep was actually made from Donald Blake's blood. Enchantress basically tricked Donald into trusting her, fed him a golden apple, cut off his head, and from the blood that spilled forth from his body, Keep was created. After the story where she and Keep fought against and lost to Thor in Hell, as he was dead at the time, we never really see Keep again. So that's that, I guess.
Coming in at number 2, we have the tragic romance of Thanos and death. And no, I'm not just saying Thanos dies a lot, although that has happened a few times. I mean the literal personification of the concept of death. First appearing to Thanos as a child and becoming his only close relationship, Thanos' entire reason for wiping out civilizations isn't to balance the cosmic scales like it was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but rather as an offering to the only woman he's ever loved. The revelation that this woman is essentially the Grim Reaper is hinted to be the incident that actually drove the Mad Titan mad, and his pursuit of more and more destruction, even as she continues to ignore his advances, means that this romance is just as doomed as it is bizarre.
Number 1, Darkseid and Granny Goodness. Yeah, this is a thing that happened, and although it might maybe make sense on paper, maybe, it definitely didn't make sense in the context of this story, at least not from my perspective. In my perspective, this story is pretty nope, but hey, you might like it, and that's okay. This all went down in what I believe is a non-canon 6-issue miniseries following the Female Furies, titled simply Female Furies. Here we learn of all the oppression the Furies suffer on Apokolips because they're women, which, based on what we know about the Furies in main continuity, doesn't make a lot of sense. Part of the reason why this is definitely not a main continuity story. As some of the fiercest warriors on Apokolips, the Furies themselves are women and are treated as equals. You see, as some of the fiercest warriors on Apokolips in the main continuity, the Furies themselves are women but are still treated as equals. Granny Goodness is also presented in a different light, and it is heavily implied that she is forced into a sexual relationship with Darkseid in order to maintain her position of power. Yeah, that's a thing that happens. Even then, she and the other women warriors are constantly undermined by the men. As I said, it's not in continuity or canon, at least I really hope it isn't. But even then, it still feels like it's reaching, even if it was non-canon. And we don't need a consensual, let alone a non-consensual relationship between these two in any continuity, I think. Are you with me or are you against me? Let me know in the comments.